Moving on to the other big story that we're tracking, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman was in Pune today addressing a press conference. The Finance Minister admitted that the GST may have its flaws, but it is now the law of the land. She also said, and I quote, that we can't just damn the GST now. It has been passed in Parliament and in all state assemblies. It might have flaws. It might probably give you difficulties, but I'm sorry, it is the Qanun of the country now. End of quote. Well, while the Finance Minister is speaking in Pune, the Prime Minister's office has held a GST review meeting with state and central government officers today. Now, this comes amidst the decline that we've seen in GST collections for the month of September. They've remained consistently below the asking run rate. TimsyJaipuria joins us now. Timsy, so this was an urgent meeting called by the Prime Minister's office, attended via video conference by states. What was discussed? What are the steps, the measures that states and the centre intend to take forward now to ensure that there is better compliance and a pick-up in return filings?
Well, as you rightly said, it was an urgent meeting called by the Prime Minister's office where state-level officers were joining from VC and central government officers were present in person in the PMO. And let me bring down to first what are the measures that were discussed. Measures for enhancing enforcement, matching of GSTR 1 and 3B and GSTR 2A and 3B where false claims have been claimed by taxpayers, and there is a red flag report which says that yes, they have claimed more than what the actual due is. Apart from that, more and more compliance, more and more of enforcement, strict monitoring on a daily basis of fake credits and claims, enhancing enforcement activity. Centre was asked to come up with data analytics drive on state-wise basis to be shared with states for them to work upon. Also, some of the other measures includes states asked to curb fake claims of credits and a status report to be submitted on it as soon as possible. Also, Centre was asked to use data of both income tax and customs to see how many exporters are taking fake claims. Also, curbing of claims when it comes to the excess credit that is being claimed by a buyer, that only up to 20% of excess claim can be claimed by a buyer. If the supplier is not showing full claims, then that's a buyer-supplier fault, not government. Also, government is very clear. A detailed analysis of revenue trends were done, for which a committee was formed yesterday. The committee has been asked to come up with strict and more sincere measures, is what sources say, within 15 days so that they can be acted upon. So overall, more and more compliance, enforcement, and yes, not to forget, revenue augmentation, looking at tax receipts where the returns are not getting filed. Northeastern states were identified. States like Assam and Chhattisgarh were identified where return filing is declining. So that was another cause of concern, that return filing should be prim and proper, and also comparison of number of registered taxpayers under GST with the number of return filing is still low, which needs to be ramped up. Back to you.
All right, Timsy, many thanks for joining us. Well, joining us now to take this forward is tax expert Rohan Shah. Mr. Shah, I appreciate you joining us. You know, firstly, this is not new. We've been in the GST regime for 2 years. I would imagine that getting data analytics to tell you what is happening on the evasion front should be pretty hygiene and routine stuff by now. But be that as it may, what do you make of the fact that we're seeing, clearly the centre now being concerned with the decline in revenue collections, and of course, more enforcement measures, perhaps further easing of compliance, which has been a cause for concern, though they haven't given us specifics on what they intend to do. But what do you make of this meeting that's happened today and where things currently stand?
Shireen, let me take it in two parts, right? I think one is the revenue anxiety, and the second is in terms of the architecture of the GST. In terms of the revenue anxiety, I think, we must factor in the fact that the way in which the economy is, the pace at which it is moving, there is not enough economic activity to sustain tax collections that we had estimated. So the reality is the slowdown is impacting your collections. The second issue that I would ask, and I have been asking from the beginning, is what is the integrity of the original estimates we have of what we should collect? Because if those were in overestimation, now we have a slowdown. Very clearly, we have a gap. That gap is enhanced by the fact that there is a compensatory mechanism center to state. The mistake that we must not make is to attribute the whole of that gap to evasion, or to say that the whole of that gap is something which is sunk in a black hole and we must do everything to sort of retrieve that. We honestly must ask if our original estimates were right. We then need to see over time, how the economy will galvanize and where we go from there. But if we hunt down every rupee saying it's evasion, I think it's going to be a problem. The second issue on the architecture, of course, this is the law we have today. I don't think anybody is seeking to disown the law. However, since we all seem to now accept that it was not immaculate, and maybe it could not have been immaculate, we would have had our learnings. The one worry I have is that amendments to GST, literally are coming like some sort of cereal. Every month a new thing drops. You have to adjust, you have to recalibrate, you have to readjust. If we know that we didn't achieve the ideal, why can't we sit and at one go address what is not ideal, whether it is rate, whether it is provision, and get that to say, yes, this GST 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever it is, here is it in its entirety, rather than this sort of situation that, wait and watch, this is permanently work in progress.
No, you're right about that. But what are you hearing in terms of what are the pain points that people are currently facing? Because in this meeting that the finance minister has had in Pune, where she's basically said that this is the law of the land, and she's right, it is the law of the land. But whether it's the compliance burden, whether it is these changes that are happening so frequently that you speak of, what are people telling you about the pain points that they continue to face?
So, Shireen, there are a series of pain points which are very specific to industries. But the common thread is that A, we have too many rates. B, the fundamental of every GST is that every rupee of tax paid must create credit. There could be some people who abuse the system, but we can't distort that basic principle. Now, we have situations where we have rates. Now we are seeing rate-related disputes. GST credit is a nebulous concept. If the law gives it to you, the procedure frustrates you sometimes. If you had to get a refund as an exporter, the time frame in which the verification and the returns happen frustrate you. So I think we have several critical issues. Every industry has smaller issues. There are far too many to recite. But to my mind, these critical issues which have bogged the system, if we were to say that, these are the ones we address, I think we would address 80% or more of the problems. I should also caution that, in every phase of a new legislation, you will have problems. But we are still struggling with legislative issues, and we are already in the middle of interpretation and litigation issues, which is really going to be the next generation of problems, which is interpretational divergence creating litigation. Sadly, you normally finish the legislative and then you get into this. But in this case, they've got commingled, and again, we should just be very careful about that.
Yes, that is certainly something that we should watch out for. But Pratik, while we're given to understand that rates were not discussed in this meeting that took place this evening, but if I were to bring up what the PMEAC chairman Vivek Debroy has said, and he has once again pushed for the fact that 0% should be done away with, 28% should be done away with, and he's talking about going back to a simpler rate structure. Now, in light of what we're seeing happen, there are also reports today suggesting that part of this revenue augmentation could also be higher rates. I don't know if that is going to be possible at all. But what do you make of all of this, Pratik?
Yeah, I don't think that tinkering with the rate right now is a good idea. I think there are too many challenges that the government has on the tax administration, the compliance, and the new system that they're trying to implement for e-invoicing and all of that. I think they should agree on a complete moratorium on rate changes for next, let's say, 1 year or so. and focus on the tax administration as of now. There has been a lot of, sort of rationalization of rates which has already taken place. Of course, one can argue that 28% some slab should be tinkered. But now I have, in fact, industry coming to me and they're saying that we should not do any tinkering in tax rate, because as soon as you reduce the tax rate, there is an anti-profiting angle which comes into play, and the industry genuinely doesn't want, a rate change as of now. So I think the focus should be to stabilize the administrative part of it, have the compliances sort of getting sorted out, which, returns are not getting filed. People are genuinely concerned about this whole vendor reconciliation piece. They're really struggling on the ground. So focus on tax administration, not on tax rate. And given the economic situation, I think tax increase right now, to my mind, is completely ruled out. I mean, you can look at, let's say, healthcare and education, etc., as one or two sectors, but really this is not the right time for any.
But even that, Pratik, I mean, do you think that this is the time to even consider healthcare and education?
No, it's like, healthcare industry had actually gone to the government, and they, many of the hospitals were actually arguing that they should impose 5% tax because there's a lot of input credit which is getting stuck. So you have situations where industry has gone. And I think the publishing industry had also gone to say that, on books there is no tax, but, there are a lot of inputs that they're losing out. So there are cases, maybe one or two, but that is not for revenue augmentation, but, more structural, sort of just for seamless, credits, etc. I agree with you. I don't think this is the time to increase the tax rates. When economy is going to slow down, you would rather reduce the tax rate, and that also, I'm afraid, is not an option anymore. So I think they should just focus on tax administration and ease of compliance as of now.
Okay, Pratik Jain and Rohan Shah, we will have to leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. The Prime Minister's office conducting a review meeting of the GST in order to shore up GST collections and return filings.